Hey guys, my name's Jay Wilson. I'm a freelance consultant through my company, Onyx Reporting. I apologize in advance about the sound. My headphones decided to give up the ghost, go figure. But I really wanted to get this tutorial out the door because it's something I've been working on for a couple weeks, a couple hours now. I was on a call with some people that were really struggling with some data governance concepts and things in Domo, and here we are. So the root cause of the reason why I put this tutorial together was because, it's really easy to say, yeah, use tags to keep track of metadata in Domo. And I've already talked about this already. The tagging function in Domo is good, but some of the challenges are, one, it's not fully baked in terms of a user experience, and two, it doesn't just like move through your data lineage with you. And there's not really any good reporting on it quite yet. So I built us a data set here that will get us along the way. This is a data set that's we're going to learn how I built this in JavaScript. But before we get to that, I wanted to talk about this idea of tag schemas or metadata schema. I was working on a presentation, and one of the users or one of the people I was talking to was saying, when you have tags, tags are good, but you kind of want to think about organizing them. And so you might say, well, one of the things I'm interested in tracking is the concept. What is this data set about? Is it about a customer? Is it about sales activities? Is it about expenses? And then what is the source of that data? Where is this data coming from? Now, obviously, you could say, oh, well, this data set's coming from Salesforce. That's marginally interesting. But imagine, right? We want to improve data discovery. What if I could say, hey, I have this concept. I want to look at expenses. Cool. Well, where do expenses come from? I know expenses come from Concur. I know I've got expenses that I track in my GL, and I know I've got expenses coming from XYZ other source. So the concept could be expenses, and the source could be the actual SaaS platform that the data came from. We're talking about making our data a little bit more discoverable without having to know in advance what I'm looking for. And that's kind of what I was trying to uncover here with this schema approach. On the data engineering side, if you don't know the update method for your data set, it can be really frustrating because you have to click 3 times in order to see it, and there's no reporting on that in Domo. So I added a tag that says, oh, this update method is append or replace, or it's upsert. Upsert's a really tricky one because there's literally no artifact that upsert is enabled on a data set in Domo. And then lastly, we've all had that thing where we had a data set or a data pipeline and something was not set to update automatically. Well, now we have a tag that will tell us, hey, this is what time the data set updates. And then same thing for views. I know the dataset views product is still a little bit buggy, but it's actually very powerful and incredibly powerful. What's incredibly powerful is the materialized view functionality. And again, there's no artifact for that, so I made a tag for it. Okay. My goal in all of this is not to impress you with my coding skills, it's to give you ideas of what you can track using tags and give you a framework for automating tracking that through your entire data lineage. Let's go. Okay. So I've gone through a lot of this code in some of my previous tutorials, so I'm not going to do all of it super slow. We're going to fly through the stuff you've already hopefully seen. We've got our authentication pipeline. Not going to talk about that. First thing we're going to hit is the data center. If you sniff network traffic on the data center, you can figure out when I go into the data tab and I apply a filter for type is equal to data fusion, what query am I sending to Domo? Well, it just so happens that if you add the filters array where the filter type is not data flow and not dataset view, you will get back all of the rest of the data sets. And that's what I wanted to use as my starting point. I wanted to use all of the input data sets or the raw data sets, as it were, and figure out where they're being used downstream and pass tags downstream to those data sets. All right. So let me pop over into my search data center function. So under search data center, I'm passing in my instance of Domo, a session token, and the body, which will have the filter parameters. We reviewed this in a previous tutorial. Nothing terribly new under the sun. I did slightly refactor how I set my parameters, but nothing really new here. What is worth discussing is that I'm choosing between two APIs. For this pipeline, and actually for all of the work that I'm doing, it was fine to hit the v3 data sources search API. And you'll actually see that in Domo in the browser. That one gets used a lot. But again, what am I doing? I'm sending my body with my filter criteria to this API, and it's going to return a data sources query object that has a property called data sources, which is an array. And then one of the things we talked about is, hey, I'm going to loop over the query response because it's a paginated query. It's got pages of results, and I want to make sure I get all of the results. So I'm going to loop over that until I'm done. Cool. Let me go ahead and print the results so you can kind of see it. What is it called? All data sets. So here we can see it looping, and okay, fine. All data sets dot data sources. I spell that right? Hey, behave. Nobody wants to watch you flounder over code. Let's go. Okay, here we go. All right. So this is just each of the data sources that are not a data flow and not a data set view. And it's interesting. I get my ID, I get, the data display type, that's good. I get the name, but what isn't included is I don't have any information about the stream. The stream speaks to when is my data set updated and what is the update method, append, replace, or whatever. That data is not here, although I do have a nice tags list. That's kind of cute. So because I don't have all of the data that I need and I don't have my lineage, I'm going to go ahead and end up running through the flatten lineage function for the gazillionth time. Again, we've done tutorials on this. Okay, so I think I made some slight modifications here, but this time flatten lineage will have two action types based off of the type. One will be for data flows and a different set of actions for data sources. I'm interested in navigating the data source lineage, so let's take a look at that. We're going to hit the data sources API again. We're going to include all details, but the data sources API doesn't give you any of the streams data, the information about how the data gets updated in Domo. And so those configuration settings are under the streams API. And what I do is I say, hey, data source gives me, stuff about the data source. I capture that stream ID if it exists, and if it does, I'll go through the stream API. Now, why am I testing if the stream ID exists? Well, for example, the oh my gosh, Workbench. Workbench connectors don't have a stream. Well, they don't have a stream because I push the data from Workbench. And so if you want to know, like, what's the schedule for Workbench jobs, like that kind of stuff, well, it isn't there. But I can now identify my Workbench data sets, which was a departure from, what we currently have. There is no really strong artifact for your Workbench source data sets, and certainly no schedule. But we might try to solve that problem another time. In any event, I hit that stream API and add that data to my data source objects. Now, there's not hundreds, there's maybe 50 fields that are coming back from the data source API and the streams API. And I really only wanted to keep the interesting ones. So I kind of subset that here to make it a little bit more manageable as I'm writing out. Cool. Let's go ahead and console.log that lineage. Now, this was a bit of a tough one to wrap my head around. Remember, all data sources was just each data set from the data center. So I have 200 data sets, I've got 200 data sources. Lineage, though, speaks to all of the children or all of the places my data set was used. So this data set, a data set could be part of 1, 5, or 20 different lineages. And that's important because when I get down to the end of a data flow, if I want to know all of the different concepts that are part of it, right? Oh, I've got expense data, I've got finance data, I've got operational planning data. Okay, those are all of the concepts of data sources that were consumed in making that dashboard data set. And that's what we need the lineage for. We'll get to that in a moment. But I guess what I really want to highlight is that when I look at, I don't have any particularly strong examples right now. Okay. What I wanted to show you but don't have an example of is one lineage could consist of one or many different data sets if it were part of a ETL or had an ETL chain. But right now, each lineage is just one object. That's just in any event, we can see here that I've returned, the properties that I'm interested in, including my tags, features, and stream objects. All right, we're getting to the good stuff. Here we go. This is where it started to get bonkers. Okay, so every data set has tags. Well, it does now anyway. Many of your data sets will have tags. Some will be defined by end users, and others are going to be part of this schema concept that we have. So how do I manage updating the tags? Well, the first thing I needed to do was define my tags. So let's go and take a look at that function. My define tags function is going to take the tags list of the parent object. So whatever the source data set is, let's take those tags and use that as my foundation for pushing downstream. I'll say, hey, I want to capture my parent's display type. So NetSuite, Salesforce, Jira, whatever that source is. If there was a stream object, there is a advanced scheduled JSON text that will tell me, oh, this data set was updated at this time, and it's a manual or it's automatic or an advanced update setting. And so I can get that as a tag on my data sets. Again, what we're talking about, guys, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, just in case. We're talking about, Zoom. If I go to settings, you've done the thing where you're like, oh gosh, I can't remember if I set it to update at 4 a.m. or whatever it's supposed to be. Well, now I have a tag for that, and that tag will automatically update. Cool. Update method. Okay, so, oh, that's misspelled. Update method is upsert. If my data set has a feature upsert allowed is true, then we're going to write update method is upsert. If it's not true and there's a stream object, then we're going to say it's replace or an append. I don't like this code. But all right, we'll leave it. And then similarly, if there is a features object and there's something called a materialized view object, then I can say, yeah, this data set is a materialized view. Cool. So that creates an array of all of the different tags of interest. Then I need to run my ds update tags function that will replace all of the existing tags with my new tags. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass my new tags and the tags for the data set that I'm currently at. So let's take a look at my update tags function, which I think we've gone over before, but update tags will where are you? Yeah. Update tags will perform a different action depending on my case statement or my switch statement. If my action is to add tags, then it's going to take the existing tags and deduplicate them with whatever the new tags array is. If I'm replacing all of the tags, I'm just going to pass my new tags. And then I can also delete tags. Fine. The whole point is to hit the tags API. I'm going to do a post command, and my body will have the tag array. So square bracket, tag 1, tag 2, tag 3, tag 4. And that's how we update our tags. Fantastic. At this point, we've updated Domo with our new tags. That's great. One of the things I'm just thinking about right now that I need to change is that if the time of a tag changed from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m., I need to make sure that I only have one version of the update time tag. So I'll need to go back and take a look at that. Another conversation for another day. Let's talk about go ahead and updating that data set. So if your data set doesn't already exist, we're going to hit that ds dataset function, and we're going to create a data set that's got this schema. This was actually the hardest part of the whole project, taking my nested objects from JavaScript and flattening it into rows and columns in my Domo data center. And actually, if you think about what data lake engineers do, that's their job, is to flatten data that's leaving their data lake and going into a queryable data source, in our case, Adrenaline. So I'm saying, let's go take a look at data set. All right. So I'm saying, hey, depending on my action, again, I've got my switch statement. Do I need to create a data set, update my schema, or do I need to send data? I was having a heck of a time defining my data set, and I initially created it, but I set it to the wrong schema. And what's interesting is you're actually hitting the same API. So we're hitting api.domo.com v1 dataset. But when I need to update dataset schema, I'm just tacking on the dataset ID at the end and running a put command that includes the dataset ID in the body. So anyway, the difference between creating a dataset and altering the schema, relatively minimal. When it's time to send data, you pass in that pass/data in the URL, and the body has to be a CSV. Now, again, I know I've gone over this code, but this time we did make a small change to my utility function. Because, well, one, I had dataset names that had commas in them. I don't know why you would put a comma in a dataset name, but there you go. So that was a problem. And a second problem I was wrestling with is my columns could have multiple values for the concept or the source. And so I needed to wrap them in quotes so that when I pass it as the CSV, the API knows where's the start and end of a column. So that's just this little bit of extension that we did here. What we're saying is, hey, take my object, my data source object, and then strip it out into objects.values. So let me give you an example here. If this represents, this is not perfectly formed, but if this represents one data set, right? I have what's my name of my data set, what's my data set ID, la la la. And then I have the tags property that could have one or many tags. In JavaScript, it's super easy to have multi-valued columns, but in Domo or in a database, we need to flatten it into a single value column. And again, that's what we're trying to accomplish here with this objects.value and wrapping it everything in quotes using the delimiter of a quote, comma, quote. Play with it. It's fun. In any event, that's what we're sending to our that's what we're sending here to our body is comma separated values to the api.domo.com URL. Notice, by the way, I know we've talked about this before, but notice this time I'm using a developer token, not a session token. Remember, session token is at full authentication. Developer token is, follow the developer.domo.com documentation to go ahead and generate one. All right. So we defined our data set. That was fine. I ended up having to update my schema because I forgot another column in my schema. That was fine. The hardest part was flattening the data into the right shape. Remember, auto tags is an array of lineages, and each lineage is also an array. So it's an array of arrays. And so in order to collapse it down into one array, we have to use a reduce function. A reduce function says take something that's got, well, take an array and flatten it or reduce it into one value. And in a reducer, you have what's called the accumulator, which collects all of the data that we've processed, and then the object that we're working on right now. So each member of auto tags is a lineage group, and then each lineage group consists of many data sets. And what do I want to keep for each data set? Well, for each data set, I want to create a row that has a data set ID, name, concept, source, these 7 columns. And I have to have these placeholders. Maybe I have a concept, maybe I don't, but I have to have the placeholder because when I pass that CSV, the API needs to see commas for each field. Okay, so I start by creating a data set that has my placeholders. And then if my data set has tags, then I go ahead and populate concept, source, update method, and update time. So what I'm saying here is if the tags array has a tag, and that's this filter method, that starts with a C, then it's a concept. If it has a tag that starts with an S, then it's a source, and so on. Now, what's nice or interesting about the filter method is the filter method will create an array, which again is part of why we had to modify our utility function, right? Because source, concept, update method, and all those could contain one value or an array of values, but we need to flatten it into one text string. Cool. That bit of code here will turn my tag into individual columns, if you will, for my row. This is where it got. Now, the final data set that I want to have in Domo is 1 row per data set, not 1 row per lineage or 1 row per use of a data set in a lineage. I want 1 row per data set. So what I had to do is I had to say, hey, my final data set should just be 1 row per data set. So I need to reduce again and just say, hey, if my data set is already in the final table, add stuff to it, but don't add that data set twice. And so that's what our reduce function is doing here. We're trying to do a deduplication action. So what I'm saying is search my accumulator for the data set based off of the data set ID. If there's a match, then we start combining tags. If the index is -1, that means the data set that I'm currently looking at doesn't exist in my accumulator. So just add it to the accumulator because it's not there yet. Let's talk for a moment about this line of code here. So remember, concept is an array, and it could have 1 or 5 or 7 values in it. And I could be trying to add 5 or 6 more values. What new set does, a set of values is a set of distinct or a set of unique values. So what new set does is it says, hey, your update method for the last 3 data sets in your lineage could have all been replaced. But instead of having 3 replace tags, I'm just going to tag it once as replace. If I have a replace and an upsert, then I could have 2 distinct values. The point of new set is it will only give you distinct values. And that's what we're going for here. Okay. That was a lot. Guys, I make this code available for you because when I was starting working with APIs, people were like, yeah, it's just automation, just write some code. And I'm like, I have no idea where to get started. What are the individual steps required to do this automation task? And so what I wanted to do here is kind of walk you through, here's this highfalutin idea. This is the goal that we want to get to. And here are the individual steps written out in code or pseudocode, if you can't write it that quickly, right, that are going to help us construct this final data set that we need. We're navigating across a couple of different APIs. What's super cool about this, guys, is Domo could take this code and build it into their platform. Wouldn't that be great? Or we could put a front end on this and build a little Electron app, like the guys at Crystal Ballers are doing with their major Domo. But this is the code to get you started. And it doesn't matter if you know JavaScript or if you want to do Python. Pick one, both will work. Okay. The last thing I wanted to talk about is, high level, what was our goal here? Our goal was to make our data center more searchable. I've only got 318 data sets in Domo, and that's hard enough to manage. Imagine having thousands of data sets. How do I make it more searchable? How do I make it easier to find the thing I'm looking for, especially if I'm a new analyst? Sure, we have our dashboard data sets, but if I want to do data science, I need to be able to go to kind of a little rawer format. And by organizing your tags into concepts and tagging your data by the source might help you be a little bit more productive in Domo. My name's Jay Wilson. I'm a freelance consultant through my company at Onyx Reporting. I obviously do Domo implementation. I write a little bit of code, and I can also sit with you and talk data strategy and Domo governance strategy. If you're interested, hit me up at jae@onyxreporting.com. If you like the video, like, subscribe. No, seriously, please like and subscribe. It really does help me. And I'll catch you guys later.